This week we're at Redcliffe and we're catching up with the club history for the 80th anniversary with Dos Buchanan, one of our life members. Dos, what have you got here?
I've got a few photos here, Deb, that I thought I'd put together for your acceptance for the dinner, and a few of the original letters. Here is some of Mary Nan's girls. Mary Nan started our club in 32, and we've got a lot of her girls.
Tell us a little bit about Mary Nan. She was a very significant role in the club.
Oh, Mary was brilliant. Mary was a brilliant coach, and she also had the history of being the only female coach to coach A-grade men. Mary could pick a player. The minute they walked onto a hockey field, Mary could tell you whether they'd make a player or not.
Just tell us about the gates over there that have Mary Nan fields on them.
Well, Mary Nan did so much for hockey on the peninsula. She was a dedicated lady to the sport, and to honour her dedication for what she put into this sport, the mayor, who was at the time Jim Houghton, he and his councillors, Mrs. Keitha Drake, decided they should name the fields after Mary Nan. So they've opened the Mary Nan gates and called it the Mary Nan Hockey Fields. And we're very happy that they've done that. Yeah.
How have things changed with the fields here since Mary's time?
Well, it's very disappointing. We had to surrender the top field. We had 3 hockey fields here. We started off with 1 and then we ended up with 3. But we had to surrender our top field because we wanted a new clubhouse. And they suggested if we surrendered the top field plus our old clubhouse, we would get a grant, which we have succeeded in doing. Mary would have been very disappointed, but I'm sure she would have approved of what's going ahead in the future. Now here's another photo. This is another premiership with the A-grade men. At this particular time, Don Argus became coach. Mary retired and Don Argus took over to coach the A men.
Right.
Which very successful too, I might add. And here is some of the old shots. Now a photo here I have is, this is the original team that put the men into A-grade. They were never into A-grade until this team won a premiership.
Right.
And that was back in 1960. And so in 1961 they then became A1 Redcliffe.
Right.
Now here's another photo of Mary. Now this is a brilliant photo of Mary in her older age, beg your pardon. And a few of her friends. There was Ballassim, who was an Australian umpire and a life member of this club, and Reen Kirkwood. And Reen Kirkwood was an international player back in 1938, but unfortunately didn't go away because of the war. Reen and Mary and Bella were really brilliant workers for Redcliffe. Our hockey boys, our A-grade boys at the time, used to play the Queensland women. They'd come down here and practice with our men. Mary Nan coached them occasionally. Ruby Robinson mainly was their coach at different times, but Mary coached occasionally. And we did get we got 3 of our girls in the Brisbane team, and we've got two of our girls made the second Australian side, but they didn't play. It was only a picked side. At that particular time they didn't play.
Dos, I see you've brought some uniforms and some sticks along. Can you tell us about those?
Oh yes, the uniforms. We used to wear a green tunic, 3-pleated, with a red sash and a white blouse. But the nice part about it, we wore bloomers. Oh, none of these little bikinis for us. We had to have bloomers.
No lycra?
No, oh no, it was cotton. And then they went into skirts. And then they went into, from the skirts with the skirts they wore green and white check gingham with the Redcliffe badge on the front.
Pocket.
Yeah. Way back in the 38s, we had a brown tunic. We used to be called the Peninsula, and not Redcliffe.
What are the bases for the club colours, the green, red and white?
Well, as I can remember, we played in the brown tunics because we were called Peninsula, and that was the colours that the Mary's girls played in, and we just continued on with the colours. But then later on we joined the men. We were called the associates, and then we joined the men when the men's first president, Hal Buchanan, came into the club. He thought the girls should join the boys and become one club and call us Redcliffe Hockey Club and Redcliffe Women's or Redcliffe Ladies, whatever we preferred. So then he thought we should change the colour. But at first Brisbane wouldn't give us permission to change. We asked for, I think back in about 1953, if I remember rightly, or no, I'm sorry, it'd be about 1949, something like that. 1950 we changed over to our green. Right. But that's about all I can say about the uniforms. And as for the sticks, the sticks had a huge hook on them. I forgot the measurement. then it's gone right down to practically nothing. Now I can see why they can control the ball so well with a small hook.
Yeah.
That big hook would be a lot harder to do what they're doing today.
You've done well to hang on to it this long.
Yes, yes. I mean, I look at it every so often and think I can't even walk a hockey field now, let alone run it.
Just wondering, your family history with the Redcliffe Club?
Well, it goes back a fair way, Deb. I started in under-8s here at age 5, followed my brother and sister into the club, and my mother had played and my father had also played. And so that was probably back in about 1968, and I've been sort of associated with Redcliffe on and off in a lot of different roles across the course of that time. So I had a few years away across the course of the journey, but effectively played from under-8s through to first grade without any sort of break, and then sort of after I'd finished with first grade came back and played a bit of second grade, third grade, and gradually sort of worked my way down the grades. And when my kids came along, got back into sort of junior ranks with coaching, particularly my daughter initially. She started in under-11s. Connor, my son, didn't start until later, and I coached him through J's, and still coaching Soph in the J1s, and still playing occasionally when we're short.
In the Masters competition?
No, generally just in third grade.
Divisional.
Tuesday nights are a bit hard for me to get motivated for, so no, I prefer to play on the weekends. Gives me a bit of time to recover. And so just when the need arises at the moment. But I sort of got a bit back into it, more so into the senior ranks this year in a sort of administration type role with the senior men. So yeah, it's been a good year in terms of that, and just sort of broadening your area of responsibility, I suppose.
Tell us about the club as it is today.
Okay. Well, at the moment, I suppose we're in a little bit of a transition period. I'm lucky in that I've had such a long history and getting longer all the time as an association with the club, and so I've seen it progress from where we were all playing on grass and wearing old cotton uniforms and very much an amateur sort of organisation. With a very dodgy old clubhouse up the end, and all playing on a Saturday, second grade playing 1:30, and then followed by first playing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that happened every week, and then it was home and away. So it was a very structured sort of program that we ran back then, and I've been lucky enough to sort of experience that side of the club and how hockey ran at that time, and then I suppose into a more modern era where we're playing on turf, and there's a lot more flexibility in terms of the scheduling of games, and an element or a lot more professionalism in terms of how things are run. And to be honest, there's sort of good and bad on both sides. Certainly when we were all playing on Saturdays and all the grades were together and it was home and away, there was a great deal of sort of club spirit and
more club atmosphere.
Yeah, and that was a really positive element of those days. Now, obviously the skill level has increased and the game's played at a very high standard and it's very fast, but I think there's been a certain sort of a loss in that as well. Where we're placed at the moment as a club, Redcliffe, being one of the smaller clubs, has its ups and downs, and I think we sort of have bounced along, having success intermittently. We've had some very good players here. We've had years where we've been strong in all grades, and then we've had other years where we've really struggled. And that's been across both the men and the women, and also within our junior grades, both boys and girls. At the moment, it's a bit of a contrast between our men and women, where the men are still very strong and competitive in our first two grades, but we're lacking a bit of depth there, whereas in the women we're not so strong at the top end, but then we've got more depth in terms of juniors and in the lower grades. So there's a bit of a contrast between our two divisions. I think we're at a really good time at Redcliffe in terms of looking forward. I think there's a lot of positive things that are going to happen over the next little while, one of which is that we're going to be getting a clubhouse built starting in September, and so I think that'll be a big sort of kick along for our club and our ability to attract new players and retain new players. We've always been lucky, or since 1988, we've been lucky to have our own turf. We were the first club to put down a turf, and that was a big kickstart to that particular era, and I was lucky enough to be part of that. And we won premierships in 88 and 89 on the back of that turf. And I don't think that was any accident that occurred. And so hopefully, you know, same sort of thing will happen with a new clubhouse, where we'll just sort of have that kickstart of enthusiasm. We had our turf relaid about 6 years ago, and that sort of got us, you know, a nice little shot along. And so it's a real advantage for us as a club, and with the new clubhouse, I think we'll be very well placed in terms of our going forward into the future.
Cam, I believe Redcliffe's turned out some pretty competitive players in their time. Can you tell us about some of them?
Yeah, certainly from my experience, probably the players that stand out that were Redcliffe-based players. Greg Browning played for Redcliffe initially, having gone to Redcliffe High. However, he had left and moved on to Bulimba by the time I got into senior ranks. But you know, he was an outstanding player and made the Olympic side from Redcliffe, and played in premiership winning teams at Redcliffe. Within my playing time, Graham Reid, I played juniors all through with Graham. He is a year younger than me, but we played in, you know, representative sides together, and effectively would join up every second year in juniors. And then when we made it into senior ranks, we played for a lot of years together. And so he's currently the assistant coach to the Olympic side, and had a long career with the Kookaburras. He's now in Perth, unfortunately, because, you know, he would have been a fantastic addition to this club, but he's married a Perth girl and moved to Perth quite a while ago now. But he was an outstanding player, outstanding leader, and he was our coach and captain in the '89 final, which we won. So they're very fond memories, and is a very, very good friend of mine. So he's certainly one that stands out. And in terms of today's player, we've got Matty Swan over in the Olympics at the moment. He was originally from Mackay, but has played with us for the last couple of years. So they're probably the standouts from my point of view. Yeah.
Do you think those top level players have left a bit of a legacy with the club?
Yeah, certainly. Certainly Greg and players of his generation, David Argus and Robbie Summers, were two players that stand out to my mind. They coached and were part of the first grade side when I first arrived in the senior team. And certainly those players had a hardness and a commitment to excellence and a drive to their training that certainly was instilled into younger players as you came through. And I was lucky to come through with a generation of players where we were all very much the same age, and followed that generation on probably maybe 8 or 10 years after those guys. And but still had that sort of influence upon our thinking and the way we approached our hockey and the way we trained and prepared for games, and the sort of importance of you know, putting on a Redcliffe shirt. And so, you know, players like Graham and other guys that I played with, Scott Keddy and Trevor Barsby, we hopefully carried that through. And, you know, we always played the game, you know, with a strong will to win, and trained, you know, as hard as we possibly could, and that's something that you sort of carry through with you, I think. But it's certainly instilled in you, you know, when you're young and a more impressionable player, and those guys certainly, you know, built that ethos in this club, and it's something that hopefully is carried through to today.
Can you explain their relationship with the Leagues Club?
Okay, well, they're our major sponsor, and have been for the last number of years. As with any amateur club, amateur hockey club, there's always a struggle for funding and fundraising, and they've been very gracious in coming on board and supporting us. They're a very good supporter of all local Redcliffe sporting clubs, being the major club on the peninsula, and they've been an excellent sort of ally in terms of keeping the club functioning. Our association with them is not a close one in terms of, you know, they're not down here visiting all the time, but there's the ongoing financial support, and we have our annual dinner each year at the Leagues Club, which is an excellent venue, and our upcoming 80th dinner is going to be held at the Leagues Club as well. So yeah, they're an excellent supporter.
So Cam, you mentioned the dinner. I believe this year's a special anniversary dinner for the club.
Yeah, certainly. You know, I don't think there's be too many clubs around with 80 years of history, and Redcliffe is celebrating our 80th year this year at the Leagues Club, as I mentioned. There are tickets still available, so if there's anybody out there who's wanting to come along, who's been at all associated with the club, $50, and
1st of September's the date.
1st of September is the date, yeah. It should be a good night.
Great, we're all looking forward to it.
Yeah.